Just from the perspective of their cultivation strength, Jacob had unlocked 65 acupoints, and Jonah, who was already on the 5th level, had at least 232 openings. Jacob was equivalent to a low-tier core formation realm cultivator, and Jonah was equal to a low-tier nascent soul realm cultivator. Just then, Snowflake was released from Jacob's necklace. By the time Snowflake had landed, it had transformed into a majestic snow lion. Snowflake's eyes were wide open as it looked down and stared at Jonah with deterrence. "So a spirit beast is helping you to fight. I was going to fight you with my bare hands. Now I am going to use my weapon." Although Jonah was speaking coldly, his eyes revealed the high confidence he had in himself as a black longsword grew out of his palm. Jonah has always been the source of pride for his clan, as he has never been defeated in any kind of competition. If his cousin, Chris, were defeated by an Earth Elemental Dragon, it would be fine. However, since a 3rd-level Water Elemental Dragon beat Chris, he felt like the pride of the Earth Elemental Dragons was hurt, and he had to gain it back. Although there were large numbers of Water Elemental Dragons, Earth Elemental Dragons weren't easy to mess with either. Because of that reason, Jonah started to move. Within the blink of an eye, he was charging forward at a great speed, and the black sword turned into a black line as it chopped toward Jacob. An earth-shaking noise was made. Jacob took a few steps back as blood started rushing around in his chest. Although the sword array formations were extremely powerful, real combat was different from commanding and displaying the sword energies gracefully. After turning around, Jonah took another slash at Jacob with his black sword. Jacob's sword energy collided with his black sword again. Even with his body that was tempered by heavenly lightning and trained by the fundamental boxing techniques, Jacob still couldn't bear the weight of the strike, and his feet created 2 deep pits on the ground and almost made him fall over. Simultaneously, the black sword changed its direction and slashed toward Jacob's waist. 3 moves were made in one go. It was important to know that Jonah spent 90% of his time training in the mountains. His sword skills were even better than Susan's. Snowflake formed a fireball inside its mouth anxiously, yet it didn't know where to aim. Since Jacob and Jonah were engaged in close-range combat, Snowflake didn't know what to do. Right at the moment when the black sword was about to slice through Jacob's waist, 10 sword energies suddenly appeared vertically and blocked the sword. The Sword Shadow Scroll formed sword energies with one's nature essence. In theory, Jacob could release sword energies from every pore on his body. Jonah's black sword directly cut through the 10 weak sword energies. 2 gray sword energies appeared under Jacob's feet and lifted him as he started flying. Jonah was a bit shocked. However, with the strength of the 5th level, he didn't need to rely on external items to fly. He flew into the air and chased after Jacob like a meteor. "Snowflake!" Jacob yelled. Snowflake, who understood Jacob very well, jumped into the air and lifted Jacob higher with its back. Jonah missed his stab, so he changed his direction mid-air and shot a sword energy out with the black sword. Snowflake spat out the fireball from its mouth immediately. Everyone in the forest felt the heat wave, as the leaves in the forest were all burned in an instant. It was at this moment that Jacob released all his sword energies at the same time. All 160 sword energies formed the 2 dragons array formation. With a much greater power compared to the snake array formation, the sword energies turned into 2 dragons as they dashed out of the water and toward Jonah. Jonah's black sword shot out close to 100 black sword energies, but Jacob still had more. Along with Snowflake's fireball, an earth-breaking force rushed toward Jonah. The sword array formation went straight through Jonah's defense and directly hit the huge tree behind him. The defensive array formation protecting this forest began to tremble. Jonah was blown backward by the force of the two dragons' array formation. He finally steadied himself by stabbing his sword into the side of a tree. 5 cultivators, including Chris, were all flabbergasted. Not only because they saw the power of a 5th-level cultivator, but also because a 3rd-level cultivator was able to fight neck to neck with a 5th-level cultivator. 160 sword energies were hovering mid-air, and Snowflake rolled its head and stared at Jonah angrily. Chris, who was hiding behind the tree that just collapsed, looked at the gleaming 160 sword energies and was completely frightened. Jacob held back a little of his strength when he was fighting Chris. If he released 160 sword energies, even 10 Chris's wouldn't be able to defeat him. It wasn't hard to control a sword, but controlling 160 sword energies that were made of 5 different elemental essences was hard. Strong mental power and strength were needed to manage all 160 sword energies at the same time. Ordinary cultivators could only close their eyes and face their deaths when 160 sword energies were flying toward them at the same time. The 2 3rd-level female cultivators couldn't help but be in awe of Jacob's heroic posture as he rode the snow lion and controlled many sword energies. Compared to Chris, who was a fake 5th-level cultivator, Jacob looked more like their Prince Charming at this moment. Defeated a 4th-level cultivator with 1 strike and a 5th-level cultivator with a few moves. It was at this moment, when everything seemed to have settled, a black light suddenly punctured through the soil directly beneath Jacob and Snowflake and shot upward. The cold tip of the sword appeared in front of Jacob's forehead. "You are defeated," Jonah announced coldly. It was the first time that Jacob felt like death was so close to him. A few inches closer, and his forehead could get pierced open by the sharp sword. This black sword was made from a piece of strange stone that repelled water, fire, and heavenly lightning. Its quality was even better than Susan's sword. Jonah suddenly put his black sword back into his body. "You are an assisting inspector." He glimpsed at Jacob's forehead and waved toward the direction of the highest tree in the forest. A coat slowly fell off of that tree. The coat was then sucked into his hand, and he slightly twirled in the air as the coat slid itself onto his body. Earth elemental dragons were talented at moving without attracting much attention. Jonah camouflaged himself with a split technique during the battle. He went stealthily underneath Jacob and defeated him by surprise. Jacob placed his sword energies all around him except for the ground directly below him. Jonah's provoking expression set Snowflake off. It was ready to throw itself at Jonah after waving its paws, but Jacob stopped it by holding onto its fur. Jacob was reluctant to admit defeat, but that didn't change anything. He would have been a dead man if this was a real life-and-death battle. It was the brutal reality that he was not as experienced in combat. "It would be really boring if all the inspectors in the system are on your level." Jonah glimpsed at Jacob coldly again as he slowly put the aura of 5th level away. The few 3rd-level cultivators nearby felt slightly relieved. The pressure Jonah created during the battle was enough to suffocate them. The higher the level a dragon cultivator got, the harder it was to progress. It was easy to reach the 3rd level, but only a few cultivators could get to the 5th level. Specifically, in the Water Elemental Dragon Clan, a 5th level cultivator could easily become an elder in any smaller river, stream, or lake dragon clan. Jacob kept quiet on Snowflake's back. "I will be attending the general examination at the Dragon God Shrine this year, and I won't go easy on you if I see you there." After saying that, Jonah turned to Chris and said, "Let's go." Chris ran over to Jonah and followed him into the teleportation array. The other 4 third-level cultivators realized the change in the situation and followed them as well. Snowflake spat out another fireball, turning a tree not far from them into ashes immediately. Snowflake wanted to bite off Jonah's neck. However, it wasn't strong enough to defeat him yet. Jacob turned around slowly to look at Jonah as he left. He was still silent.